You're listening to Music Tectonics.
How to
start up.
How to start up.
Welcome back to Music Tectonics, where we go beneath the surface of music and tech. I'm Dmitri I'm also the founder and CEO of Rock, Paper, Scissors, the PR and marketing firm that specializes in music tech and innovation. For the month of August, we're rewinding and playing back some of our favorite guests. Today, I talk with my friend Tracy Maddux, the former CEO of AVL Digital and CD Baby. We talk through the fundamentals of what it takes to really start up. This is one of the first in our How to Startup series, and I think it's so full of really practical advice for founders. By the end of this episode, you'll have a clear understanding of some of the important decisions that shape the future of your business. Let's go to that conversation now. Tracy Maddux, welcome back to the Music Tectonics podcast.
Thanks for having me back, Dmitri.
This is great because with that fancy MBA, you can really help, I think, startups think through some robust business practices. And of course, all the experience you've had running companies, buying companies, merging companies will become handy as people are just beginning to set the foundation for what they need to build. So I'm going to dive in here, Tracy. When you meet a new startup with a first-time founder, how do you explain to them the components of building a company? And are we talking about setting up the books or hiring people or incorporating? What kind of stuff are you thinking about for a new startup?
Well, I think the first one, and I'll borrow this from Stephen Covey, is beginning with the end in mind. In other words, you're going to create something. How's it going to end? Are you, as a founder, thinking about an exit where you sell the company? Are you building something that's kind of a forever company where you plan to hire a workforce, build a business, and be around the rest of your life? And I think more importantly than just what's the end is, what's the plan to get there? Specifically, when you're thinking about, starting a business, beyond like, what are you trying to accomplish and how do you exit? What's the first step in capitalizing that business? Is it your own money? Is it investors' money? Because those two questions are very intertwined. Obviously, if you're raising money from somebody else, they're going to want it back. They're going to want it back with the return. And so you really need to think about, where am I going? Where's this thing going to be for me? Is it a sale? Am I going to take dividends out over time? And then how am I thinking about the people that will own this company along with me, whether that's employees, investors, and specifically, how do I get them paid back and a return on their investment?
Interesting. That's very interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of startup founders probably start off with, they just have an idea, right? They think there's a solution to something. They've been in the industry and they're trying to solve a problem, or they just think this would be really cool. Let's do it. But you're saying you can't just think through that. You can't just think through the business model and how you're going to actually generate revenue. You have to think about, like, are you selling? Are you keeping? Are you building something for revenue? What point are you selling? Like, that's a lot of detail for someone who just gets started.
It doesn't work out too well when a founder just wings it, right? Going out and raising money. First of all, it's hard to convince people to lend you money or to invest in your company or your idea unless they understand kind of the economics of it. So kind of really thinking through, again, what's my investment, and then what other investment am I going to need to attract to bring this thing to life? That's really where it starts.
Okay. So got that, like, really keeping the end in mind. That's super interesting to make sure that's early on. What are some of the most common things you wish startups would do sooner or at all to set themselves up for success down the road?
Well, I think founders are kind of a rare breed. They rarely suffer from lack of self-confidence. They are overcome with a belief in themselves and their ability to build something. And so that can be both a benefit to a company's success, but also can be a huge detractor. So the thing that I would advise a founding CEO or a founder to do is to figure out, what's my role, and then what are the things I'm actually not that good at, where I could utilize the expertise of others. and how do I see that role maturing as the company grows, as the product launches, as we start to fulfill client needs, whatever the purpose of the company is. And so really thinking about, what is my role? What hats am I going to be wearing here? And then I think it creates, kind of fertile ground for the next thing, which is, what kind of people am I going to surround myself with? Who do I need to hire? And then, the kind of fruit of that fertile ground is culture, right? Like, what kind of culture do I want to build? But it really starts with where am I in this business? And this kind of realization that I can't do it all, and I'm going to need to surround myself with experts. So, how do I see my role as founder maturing? Am I going to be somebody who is kind of an investor or an ideas person who is building a team to lead this thing forward, or I'm going to lead the team? Or am I going to lead the team for a while until we get to a certain point and then hire somebody? So really kind of thinking through, what are the roles and hats that I'm going to wear as a founder?
Interesting. Yeah, I'm curious, does that advice for building a company in terms of team change based on whether a founder is a technical founder or a non-technical founder?
I don't think so. I mean, I've seen some really excellent technical founders that are good at identifying talent and really good at the soft stuff. And I've seen some, really kind of, founders with more of a leadership and organizational design and HR background, just dreadful at inspiring people. And so I think it really is dependent on where somebody's coming from, and also an honest assessment of their ability to inspire others to be productive. That's a rare thing, but I don't think it's specific to either technical or non-technical founders.
It's funny. I think I was expecting to hear like, first hire this role, then hire that role. Make sure you take this into consideration. You can outsource this or outsource that. And I'm getting a much like deeper, almost like soul searching type responses from you, where it's like, you got to understand what your company culture is. You got to understand, what your end strategy is. And I'm like, oh, but do you have thoughts on like specific like team building in terms of like, who is your first hire?
Well, they might teach that in business school today, and perhaps I'm just unlearning, the experience I had 25 years ago when I was an MBA student. But the fact of the matter is we all bring different strengths and weaknesses to a business. Businesses vary in terms of what they need. And so it's really difficult to kind of prescribe a cookie cutter. But I will say, a founder or a small group of founders, starting with kind of a skills and strengths and weaknesses assessment will lead you to kind of better understand where to fill the gaps. And so if a founder has, a highly technical background and can serve as the writer of the code or the builder of the servers for the first, year or two of the existence, it saves a tremendous amount of expense trying to outsource that. Another example I'll throw out there is if somebody, has kind of a finance or business background or mind and can do the books themselves, why run out and hire a finance team? And so, regardless of what those skills, strengths, and weaknesses are, I think the assessment of that in the founder group is really the first thing to start when building an organization. And then I think the second question, and this is really where millions and billions are made, are like, what kind of culture, what kind of company do we want to be? In other words, is culture important, and how are we going to build it so people are really passionate when they come to work? Because getting those first hires right is less about role and more about passion, more about, am I invested? Am I really, ready to, along with these founders, go all in and build something special?
So I wasn't planning to ask this, but I'm thinking about, based on that response, obviously you have to either have revenue or investment to hire somebody at first. But you also have looked at a lot of deals as an investor, as a potential acquirer of companies. Are there, when somebody's like seeking investment and they're saying, here's the budget, here's our plan, are there things that you look at in terms of the hires that are in that investment plan that either make them more investable or less investable? Like, we're going to spend this money on X, and that X includes building out a team. Obviously, a lot of times it's building out a technical team. But are there other things that you're looking at as well?
Almost every acquisition that I was involved in at Downtown or AVL or before really had to do with teams of people rather than products. And team, a functional team, a high performing team equates to capabilities, the ability to build something, to deliver something, and that could just be excellent service. And so the thing that is most important, in that thread is, who's leading the team? Is this team likely to persist after the investment, the acquisition, whatever that is? And what additional resources can we add to make the team go further? It is really that simple. It's not to say it's simple to build a team or make a team perform at a high level, but when evaluating an investment, an acquisition, it's really about what's the team that's in place, what are they capable of, and are they likely to continue to succeed in doing these things?
Yeah, got it. Okay. All right. This has been a great start to this conversation about how to build a company as a startup. We have to take a quick break. And when we come back, let's get into some of the financial tools and processes. We'll be right back.
Time's running out to get your early bird ticket for the Music Tectonics Conference. Right now, you can secure yours for just $349. On August 19th, the price goes up to $399. Head on over to musictectonics.com to get your badge before the price jump.
Okay, we're back. Tracy, I want to ask you, what are some of the financial tools or processes a startup needs to put in place to build a company? And then are there metrics that a company should establish when they, when do they need to lead by the numbers, let's say? But let's start with those financial tools and processes.
This doesn't have to be overly complex. You see a lot of startups, investing really heavily and bringing in an analyst or a financial expert to build out a multi-year model. And that's useful, particularly if you're raising money, but it's not really necessary. What's more necessary is a believable plan that you understand, the inputs. So how much money am I investing? Who am I hiring? What's the product or service that I'm delivering? What's the cost of delivering that product or service? What's the cost of acquiring clients? And at the end of the year, end of the period, end of the budget year for the plan, what does it look like? Am I going to make money? Am I going to lose money? And if I'm going to lose money, do I have the cash to sustain this after the next period? That's really what's required to launch is a plan. It doesn't have to be overly detailed, but it does have to look forward a period. It does have to understand what the inputs are. So to your point, revenue or investment, what the costs are. So cost of production, what the expenses are, things like sales and client acquisition, and then what the net, the bottom line is. Beyond that particular tool in launching a business, it's really important within the first year or two to establish meaningful KPIs. People call these all kinds of things, but key performance indicator has always been something that resonated with me. And those are simply indications of the underlying business activity. A KPI can be something like client acquisition. Are we growing the number of clients that we're servicing in our business? It can be something as basic as, am I producing units on budget? Like what is my production efficiency versus that which I said I would do? But they generally are 2 or 3 key statistics that show the underlying progress against that plan, that financial plan that you established when you were raising money or investing your own capital to start the business.
Wow. So I don't need an MBA. I just need a spreadsheet.
I would say, just from, again, personal experience, that sometimes an MBA can be a disadvantage in starting a business, because what they teach us in business school is really, really complex stuff. Concepts like the CAPM, the way to value equities. Most businesses don't need that next level of financial and marketing expertise until they're launched. And I find that the MBAs are very useful in a business, but sometimes the simplest way forward is the best way forward. And MBAs do have a and this is a confession of an MBA, we do have a tendency to overcomplexify things.
So I hear, just the idea of kind of having some books, for one thing, just to keep track of where things are. That's a pretty basic process. And having a kind of a budget with a plan and a kind of a hypothesis, like we're going to try to do this with expenses. This is the kind of income we need to do it. This is our expectation as a result. And then reviewing that on a timed basis, monthly, quarterly, yearly. And KPIs could be what those metrics are, the data you're measuring there. Are there any other kind of clever processes or tools that even a basic startup might want to consider on the finances side, financial planning and tracking there? Maybe a reporting system. What else comes up there?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you go up a level over and above plan and KPIs, there's this level of planning that really encapsulates the intent of the leader to build a business and what they're trying to accomplish. I learned this out of business school at Intel, which is a very, very process-oriented culture and company. And there have been quite a few excellent books in management around this, but again, not to overcomplexify it. Objectives and key results, OKRs. Again, lots of different words to explain the same thing, but what exactly are we trying to accomplish at a big picture standpoint this year? Is it we're going to launch a product? We're going to sign up our first 100 clients? Having some really well-established, easily quantifiable objective or qualifiable objectives that kind of feed into the plan are a great place to start. Sure, is it useful to have a financial system? I've seen $100 million in revenue plus businesses built around QuickBooks, and really that's all you need. There's a whole class of salespeople and consultants that are out there to sell you, you the founder, you the board, what's called an enterprise resource planning system that integrates things like planning and budgeting and forecasting and financials and inventory if you're making stuff. That really is that's MBA level stuff. You don't need it as a startup. You can get by with something as simple as QuickBooks for a very long time until you really need a more professional level solution.
What do you think about lines of credit and credit cards for startups?
I think debt in general is a bad idea until there are recurring revenues. I've seen businesses in this last cycle of kind of bank disruption in 2023, essentially be unable to repay those lines when they're called because revenue isn't tracking to plan, the economy's down, whatever, and that's a point of insolvency where the firm goes away. And so until the company is profitable, or at least generating positive cash flows, I advise very strongly against lines of credit or any kind of third party debt instrument that may get called. You can get into trouble really fast in a money losing business borrowing other people's money.
I'm just asking a couple of follow-up real tactical stuff here, just so that people walk away thinking about how the rubber hits the road here. So I got another one for you. What about payroll services, outsourcing payroll?
Certainly in the United States and in the UK, where I have the most experience, you can get into a lot of trouble not administering payroll appropriately. Certainly, I've seen businesses who have failed to remit their withholdings to the government in both the U.S. and the U.K. and Canada. Use that money for working capital to pay other expenses, only to see significant fines and penalties and even criminal charges. And so having a third-party payroll provider, even if it costs a little bit of money, is a great way to stay legal and to stay safe. You're not tempted to use that money for general operations because you're paying it immediately to a third party who'll be your administrator.
Cool. Yeah. So let's. This kind of leads us into my next question, which are the legal foundations of building a company. What are some considerations for startups about those types of considerations?
Well, the beautiful thing in the Western world is if you incorporate, whether that's a C Corp, S Corp, LLC, and we can get into the differences between the three, you're getting some level of liability protection, and that includes protection against creditors in the event that things don't work out, or the protection against potential litigants if you get sued. And so, the first thing that I would advise is figure out which corporate type is optimal for you and your partners, and then incorporate. Don't wait. Don't do this just personally, even if you're investing your own money, because the protections afforded to you by our beautiful legal system and capitalist approach to these things in the West are significant and are real at preserving your wealth and your mental well-being.
And some of them offer different types of tax benefits as well to consider.
Correct. And this is where you really should consult with your attorney or tax advisor before you incorporate, because some of these decisions can be unmade, but it's expensive to unmake them. So things to consider are, what are the tax advantages of the type of corporate structure that I'm electing? An individual S Corp, for instance, from my understanding, and again, I'm not, go seek your tax advice. I'm not a tax advisor, but you're essentially not going to get some of the same tax protections as a C Corp. The income and expenses of the company will pass through your personal, your personal tax filings, and you will have personal liability, to the IRS. Not so with certain types of companies, like certain types of LLCs and C Corps, where that entity has its own tax filing, and you don't have to kind of pass those results of the business onto your personal taxes.
Yeah, again, seek your own legal and tax counsel here. That was more of just a business management, check it out, make sure that you're getting the right kind of formation of your corporation based on what you're going to do with tax filing, as well as in terms of what kind of liability protection you need. They're a little bit different. They're all a little bit different. So anything else in terms of legal considerations? What are the most common contracts templates that startups might have? I can imagine they might want to have some NDAs that they're using regularly. There may be some employment contracts, some consultant contracts. Anything else that you think? I mean, I guess part of it for me is when I started my business, hiring a payroll service was an obvious in a way. I was like, well, I'm going to screw that up pretty quickly. It seems worth the expense. But then when you start talking to lawyers, find out they're $500 an hour, and they sit down with you and you're like, I have a business. I have no money at all, no business, nothing in my bank account. And now I have to pay you, thousands of dollars to incorporate and start, every contract I do have to run it past the lawyer. What's your advice in terms of those other legal foundations?
There are a ton of, providers of stock documents like Zoom Legal that you can use for basic things like contractor agreements and sales contracts. And you don't need a lawyer to draft them all from scratch, but you do need a lawyer. And one of the things I would advise any startup to do, regardless of whether or not they plan kind of a DIY approach to use, a third-party forms provider like Zoom Legal, is just to have a relationship one. And to be clear, I don't have the budget to pay you $6,000 to do this very simple sales agreement, but I would like you to do the corporate formation documents and make sure that they're appropriately filed with my state or country of incorporation, because this is something that you want to get right. It is more expensive to get it wrong and not have a lawyer do it than to pay a lawyer to do it and get it right on the front end. The other thing that I would just say in this kind of broad category of service providers, whether it's accountants, payroll firms, or lawyers, is have a relationship with an insurance broker and think about insurance more broadly. Every business needs insurance. Even if you're a sole practitioner or consultant, you need an insurance policy. And what you're protecting against are things like cybercrime. Somebody hacks into your system and steals all your client personally identifiable information. You have liability. You may get sued. either way, you're going to want an insurance policy in place. Or you may just get sued in the course of business. You give some bad advice. And so thinking about the complexity of the firm, a more complex firm is going to need more insurance. The bigger it is, the more employees it has, the more things it's engaged in, it will be a permanent fixture on your profit and loss statement. But having a good broker that you trust and understanding the limits of coverage that you're entering, that you're paying for, are really critical to any successful business.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And even having on the calendar like once a year to do a call with your broker to review your coverage and see what's changed. Because I think, your business, the evolution of it kind of sneaks up on you, and then you realize, oh, we hired employees and we never even told our insurance company, or we now have an office and we never talked about whether it's a lease, a condo, a purchase, whatever. There's all these other implications, or we've taken on a new business line that has higher risks. We need to get some sort of professional liability umbrella on top of our existing insurance. All those things. Yeah. The thing that's painful about insurance is it costs you money, and it feels like you're sort of being shaken down for every little aspect of what could potentially happen until it happens to you. And then you're like, oh my gosh, thank goodness we had some coverage on that. And it can make or break a business, really.
100%. One maybe better way to think about all of these engagements is relationships. If you have a lawyer, an insurance broker, an accountant, a third-party accountant or tax person that you trust and is intimately familiar with your business, this is what they do for a living. They're pros for it. In fact, they have insurance and professional certifications that they have to check the box on every year. It's a much easier thing to do as part of a plan and as part of a business practice than as a remediate step, where I've had some kind of incident. I've had a driver wreck a car or an accident on the shop floor, and suddenly I've got a claim. That is not the time you want to be establishing a relationship, because that's without a relationship, you are much more likely to get shaken down and to have really kind of a bad outcome to what could be a manageable situation.
Okay, so you got your payroll system, your service provider. You've got your insurance broker. We haven't talked about bankers. What kind of relationship should startups have with bankers?
Well, unless there's debt financing as part of the capitalization of a startup, I would say having a bank account that is a separate business bank account, not your personal bank account, is critical. Knowing somebody at the bank in the event that you start to, collect money, both domestically and foreign, and it starts to set off bells and whistles. There's a lot of regulation coming online, particularly in the United States, but historically in the UK and Canada, where if you start to grow really quickly, and this is deposits of more than $10,000 in the States, you're going to get a call from your banker. And they're going to say, well, what's the source of these revenues? Who's the beneficial owner of these revenues? And you're going to have to, provide them things like articles of incorporation. You may have to send a profit and loss statement just so they're compliant with regulators people in the government. So it is good to, have certainly a relationship with the bank, have a bank account. It's helpful also to have a relationship with somebody at the bank. And that's really all that's necessary for a startup, unless you get into the habit or process of borrowing money, then the stakes go up pretty considerably.
Well, and the other piece is, if you think you might need to borrow money in the future, it's good to know those people before you ask for it. And it's also good to have a line of credit before you're desperate for it as well. I know you're saying don't go into debt early, Tracy. But sometimes, sometimes we've had a line of credit at Rock, Paper, Scissors and never used it. But because we had it, it felt like a kind of another measure of security in a sense.
That is a good point. I wouldn't rule debt out for companies that have revenue. If a great way to start a relationship with the bank is to say, hey, I've had my depository accounts with you for X number of months or years. You can see my revenues are growing. Let's talk about a line of credit. That's a great conversation starter with the banker. They would love to give you a line of credit, which typically includes a fee up front to open the line and an unused fee if you don't use it. So they're happy to take your money for the possibility of you borrowing and paying more money in interest. And so that's a fair point, and it's something that as a startup matures, I would encourage people to take a look at if that's possible.
So this has been super exciting talking about bankers and insurance, but we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, let's talk a little bit more about investment and also scaling up your business. We'll be right back.
Come hang out with the Music Tectonics team. Join us from wherever you are in the world at Seismic Activity, Music Tectonics' free online event series. About once a month, we gather the music tech community for networking, discussions, and demos by innovators and inventors. Join us and tune in to the tremors that are about to become major shakeups in the industry. See the upcoming topics on our schedule and register for our next event at musictectonics.com. Get ready to light up the chat and join in the conversation. Seismic Activity is fun, fast-paced, and interactive. Everyone who works where music and tech meet is welcome. See you soon.
Okay, Tracy, we talked a little bit about investment early in this conversation, but how does investment fit into building a company? What else we've got all these other pieces in place now. What else should we be thinking about as it relates to investment for the building of this company?
And the first thing I would think about is being appropriately or even potentially overcapitalized. What you don't want to do as a founder or a group of founders is to have to spend all your time on the act of raising money. I've seen founders get off track, lose focus on product, lose their businesses because ultimately they spend too much time on something that's really not that productive, which is asking other people to invest in their company. And so going in as part of that plan, kind of understanding how much capital you're going to need in the first year and even maybe beyond, raising that capital, banking it, having it set aside for future growth, and then focusing on running a business, building product, whatever it is. It is such a typical negative cycle to get into for founders to continually underperform an unrealistic plan, to run out of capital and to have to go back to the capital markets. And in that cycle, two things happen. One, you spend your time on the wrong activities, raising money, and the money becomes more expensive. The more desperate you become, the higher the expected return from whatever source of capital is, whether it's equity or debt capital. And so really thinking through on the front end, how much capital am I going to need? And I use the words overcapitalize or excess capitalization, having some money set away, even if it's expensive equity capital in the event that you run out or underperform plan or just run into a hiccup. That's a really important consideration on the front end.
Cool. Good. Very helpful. I mean, the other thing that comes up with building a company is the ingredients needed to scale your company. And I'm curious, how do you move from being a startup to being a scale up? We don't have to go into great depth here, but at least, we want to kind of move towards growth here.
Well, this is where you kind of get into the question you posed in the first segment, which is it's around who do you hire and people. It is generally impossible, even in this time of AI and machine learning, to build and scale a business without additional human resource. Now, certainly AI and machine learning are making that easier. They're making people more efficient. But at least for the foreseeable future, AI and computers won't replace people. And so this is where you start thinking about building the organization. And I would advise a startup, particularly one with limited capital, to think in terms of what kind of exponential scaling will I get out of the next hires, and that should dictate basically the type of expertise that you bring in and pay for. And so scaling is really about hiring the right people, having a culture where those people will be productive, and having incentives in place where those people will respond not just to the fact that they're excited about work, but they're excited about the financial reward.
When you think about scaling up, what do you think about in terms of marketing?
It's going to take time and money to scale a client base. The hardest businesses, and when I say hardest, I mean really the most expensive to scale, are consumer-facing businesses where you as the company are successful only if you convince lots and lots of people to use your product. That's expensive. Whether you're using kind of internet-based methods of reaching people, SEO PPC, SEM, or you've got a retail location. All those things are very expensive, and you have to think about that cost of client acquisition. So what's the average cost to acquire a client? And then, based on how many clients you want to add, that cost per client times the number of clients you want in the year, that's what you're going to have to spend. And sometimes that's an enormous amount of capital in a retail or kind of consumer facing business.
All right. I mean, if you made it through this far into the podcast, you get an A+, because we've gotten through a lot of stuff really quickly that probably would have cost you a couple of semesters in higher education, I think. This has been awesome. I'm curious, Tracy, is there anything else missing from our conversation about what to think about when building a company for music tech startups?
Well, I think the one thing we haven't talked about, which is one of the most important things that will occur to you once you've launched, is what is your strategy? And when I use the word strategy, I'm really talking about it in the marketplace. Is you probably have a great idea. You probably have great enthusiasm for your idea. You're probably overestimating your ability to execute that idea, which is great. This is how great companies are built. But are you thinking about the market conditions? In other words, are there consumers that are ready to buy, whatever product or service that you're going to launch? Is that market big enough to sustain the kind of company that you want to build? Can you actually achieve scale because that market's big enough? Or can you change consumer behavior in order to want to buy the product or service that you're launching? The other element is competitive, right? Most things that have been done, right? And so your idea may be very novel, it may be new, but it's probably occurred to somebody else, and there may be a business doing something very similar. And so you have to think not just one-dimensionally about, how is this company going to exist with the consumer? How is this company going to, and its competitors going to exist with the consumer? What are the potential competitive responses that company A, B, or C are going to launch in response to this product or service that I built? Since we're in music tech, I'll use this as an example, right? So Spotify is in a very difficult strategic position, right? It competes with the biggest tech platforms in the world, including Google, the YouTube Music, Apple Music, and Amazon now. These three companies are among the top 10 largest companies in the world, but they're in the same space. And so when you think about a Spotify launch, it was always going to take hundreds of millions of dollars and really even funding ongoing operating losses to be able to compete on that level. And so, your strategy has everything to do with the appropriate capitalization, your plan for the first year, and if your strategy is focused around competing in a mature market or one that's crowded by very large players, the strategy by which you acquire clients or you grow your business is going to be really critical to your long-term success, and it cannot be ignored. And it can't be ignored from the first day. It's almost as important as beginning with the end in mind. What are you trying to accomplish? Is what do I expect others, including competitors, are going to do in response to that thing that I'm launching?
I think that response really speaks to founders being prepared to have some endurance, to really to really know that there's going to be hiccups along the way, or that it's not the opening move of a chess game. It's like literally like several. You got to be thinking several moves ahead and be aware, like you said, of your competition, of the context of the market, to really be clear that things might go one way, they might go another way, and you kind of have to be prepared to pivot sometimes or to try different things.
Leading a company as founder or CEO or both is an endurance sport. It's not for the weak of constitution. It will require you to be able to be flexible mentally the first dozen times you've had setbacks, to bounce back, to emit and radiate optimism to your team, even when you're not feeling it. And this is not for the weak of heart or constitution. This is hard work. this is probably the one thing that I see founders, in addition to overestimating their own capabilities, is they underestimate just how hard this is going to be. Even if you've checked every box that we've talked about, from having an insurance broker to being overcapitalized, you will have setbacks. There will be things that come up that you haven't thought about, and how you respond to that, and how your organization comes back from that is grueling. It's very difficult to sustain that level of energy over a months, let alone years.
Not to scare anybody off, but I think actually to just plan for like a large, like there's going to be many heats to this race. It's not just the first one. Like you can't get to the first starting line of incorporating. You can't get to the first starting line of getting your first dollar in or even raising money, but expect that there's going to be multiple rounds. You're going to have to regroup and things like that. This has been an amazing opportunity, I think, to hear from you about all these different elements. I know it's been a lot. Some of it's been a little more detailed than other pieces, but I love that you bring it to that like broader philosophical and strategic level as well, because I think it's super important. Having started a couple of companies myself, I've lived through some of these things. I wish I would have listened to this podcast earlier on some elements here, and so forth. Before I let you go, Tracy, we often ask guests to go big picture with us with trends in music tech. But for this episode, I'm curious to ask you to give us a 10-year horizon and answer this question. What do you see as emerging that will have staying power for a startup that's thinking about building out their company right now?
Well, the trend that's already started, and we touched on it briefly earlier in the podcast, is that machine learning, large language models, and artificial intelligence are impacting every sector of the economy. And those that are dealing primarily in digital goods and services, selling online, providing services virtually as opposed to in real life. So basically everybody but plumbers and electricians, their business will be disrupted. It'll be impacted in some way. My wife happens to be a corporate attorney working in cybersecurity, and she relayed to me, I think it was her practice group meeting a few weeks ago, where I think it was the head partner said something like, AI is not going to put us out of business, but law firms employing AI may put us out of business. So we have to figure out how AI will impact this business and then adopt it ourselves. And I think that's a warning for every segment of the economy, maybe even electricians and plumbers, because if large language models, machine learning, and ultimately artificial intelligence can help us do it better, why not jump onto the trend and be early adopters of that technology, which makes our lives and our business and maybe even our potential as founders in this startup easier.
Amazing. Tracy, this has been so great. Tracy Maddux, thanks for joining us once again on the Music Tectonics podcast in our How to Startup series. If people want to reach out to you, what's the best way to connect? Do you have a favorite social media platform or...
Yeah, LinkedIn's a great way to reach me. I've recently kind of become a founder again. I've started my own LLC, a solo practice called Artes, ARTES Management. You can find me at artesmanagement.com, or you can get me on LinkedIn. It's TRACY MADDUX. I think I'm the one and only out there on LinkedIn, and I'd love to connect with you. And no questions, too big or small. I really love to have a conversation about these concepts of business. I've also written quite a bit, some with the help of Rock, Paper, Scissors. If you find something you like or you disagree with even, would love to hear from you. So feel free to engage with me in either path, and I'd look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks again, Tracy. Great having you on the podcast.
Great to be here. Thanks again, Dmitri.
Thanks for listening to Music Tectonics. If you like what you hear, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. We have new episodes for you every week. Did you know we do free monthly online events that you, our lovely podcast listeners, can join? Find out more at musictectonics.com. And while you're there, look for the latest about our annual conference and sign up for our newsletter to get updates. Everything we do explores the seismic shifts that shake up music and technology, the way the Earth's tectonic plates cause quakes and make mountains. Connect with Music Tectonics on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. That's my favorite platform. Connect with me, Dmitri Vitsa, if you can spell it. We'll be back again next week, if not sooner.
You're listening to Music Tectonics.